Well, hi again everybody. Welcome to my latest video. This one I'm going to be starting a new series. I'm calling it Advanced Excel. Now that's Excel from the Microsoft Office package. It's a very powerful spreadsheet tool. A lot of things to it. I'm making the presumption, of course, that most of the people who are watching this have some background using Excel, at least setting up a basic table. But I will be reviewing that a little bit in the beginning part of my demonstration. But I do want to cover in this one a lot of the aspects that I found initially very useful, but they are a little bit more on the intermediate/advanced level. Things like using conditional formatting, things like creating a macro to repeat your steps, and a few other things I want to show along the way. I am not going to show how to install Microsoft Excel for two reasons. One is the version that I have is an older version, very reliable, but it is older. And that's Microsoft Office 2010. But it is the version of that that has a lot of features to it. So it hasn't really changed that much. They've added some additional things to it. But believe me, it's very close and very useful. And it's still, being supported at least for a while. But again, what I'm going to show here doesn't matter what version of Excel you have. But the installation would change significantly. So there's no point in me going over that with you. Anyway, if you get something out of this video and you find it useful in any way, please at least consider subscribing to my channel. There's no cost involved. Okay, now I've got up a virtual image of Windows 10, and I have Microsoft Office 2010 also installed on this one. So what I will do first of all is, this is something you should always do anyway, go into Settings and then open up Update and Security, and then go ahead to Advanced Options and make sure that this is turned on. Receive updates from Microsoft products when you update Windows. It looks like it defaulted to that. Maybe the installation of Microsoft Office did that. So that's good. Let me back up here and check to see if there's any software updates. I'm going to check for updates. Let's see what we got here. And there are a few updates, including ones for Microsoft Excel, Word, and so forth. So it's a good thing that I checked this. There usually is on an old product like this, over 10 years old at this point. Okay, it's now completed and waiting for its restart. There are 8 of them that did not fully install yet, so they have to be restarted to install. And we should be up and running. So let me go right into Excel. I've already got a table started. It's the one that I have here. So this is a table that I started, but I didn't finish it. I wanted to show you a couple of tricks of the trade before I did that. First of all, I could just copy this. There's 2 ways to do it, and I could copy it and then just copy it all the way down. But there's a shortcut. You see this little teeny triangle right there? It turned to a little X plus sign when I did that. Well, if you double click on that, it automatically copies it all down. Unfortunately, it also copied into the total that I have here. So let me change that to what I should do, but that's a 1 button. Come in here to Auto Sum up here in the upper right. It'll show me what it's going to use, what rows it's going to use. I'll just say Auto Sum. It created a box that includes all the stuff I wanted. Looks perfect, so I just have to hit enter. So now that's the sum. Now I could go ahead and fancy it up a little bit, draw some lines and other stuff, bold stuff. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a shortcut. I'm just going to highlight the whole thing. This is the first trick I wanted to show you, a very powerful thing called Format as Table. Click on that and you can set it up initially as any kind of table that you want to set it up for, depending on what look you'd like to have. Very dark, all the way to medium, and all the way to very light. I like the medium. I like the ones that show this way. It automatically sees that there's something that looks like a header, and it checks it, and I can clear that if it made a wrong guess, but it did it right, and voila, we have a fancy looking table. And I could change this to any look I want or any color scheme that I want. Just go back into it, click on this little thing here, and I can go back. Let's say I want to make it really light. Could do that. Or just want to go natural. Click on this little box here. Let's just make it this one here. Make it a little bit lighter. There we go. There's two things to note here. You see these little arrows going down? They allow you to control a field. But I do not want this bottom line, row 8, to be included in that. Because let's say that I go ahead and clicked on this and said sort from smallest to largest. Well, that would include moving this column, the total line, somewhere else, potentially. Yeah, I think in that case, smallest to largest, it would work fine, but in largest to smallest, it would reverse the whole thing. But you can take this row or any rows out that you'd like by just grabbing this little corner here and dragging it up. So now that bottom row is no longer included, and I can take this one and highlight it separately in any way that I want. So for example, if I wanted to make it so that it has bolding across all of the lines on it, I could do that. I can make it italic and bold, and nothing I do up here will change it. So if I decided to sort, let's say by last name, which is one of the features that this gives you, I click on this and I can say sort A to Z. I can sort by color if I have different colors, and you'll see colors in a moment. I can do reverse, Z to A, but A to Z is the most popular. And what it did is it sorted all the rows based upon this column in alphabetical order. Now what if I wanted to sort by ID number? I could do the same thing. Let's say I want to do the most recent employee first. So I'm going to do largest to smallest. And voila, we have employee numbers. I made the assumption with that the higher number is the most recent employee. And the lower number is the older employee, the one that's not older, but the one that's been around the longest with whatever company or group this happens to represent. These are all made up names, by the way. And then this is meant to be like an hourly spreadsheet for the manager to keep track of, how many hours each individual person worked and how much they earned for the week, because they have a rate. Each person has different rates here. I don't have any two the same, just randomly picked them, to be honest with you. So that's the first thing. It's called format as a table. Before I go any further, I got to enable some options in Excel that don't come on automatically. If I go into File and then I pick Options, and what I want is, I'll start with this one, Customize the ribbon. And if you notice, it has a bunch of standard things that are meant to appear in the ribbon, but it has one unchecked, the developer. And that's for some advanced stuff that I'm going to be doing throughout this course. So I want to turn that on. Now I could go and play with all of these subtitles to each one of these if I wanted to, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to turn on all of it by clicking that. And you'll see it has a bunch of submenus to it. And even they have submenus to them. But I just selected it all and I'll say OK. Now what did that do? Well, you may not realize it, but it actually created an extra item at the top called Developer right here. That wasn't there before. You can go back and roll back the video if you want, but it wasn't until I checked that box. And under that, it brings up a whole new set of menus that are used for developing advanced features in Excel. So I wanted that on, but I want more than that. Let's pick Options again. This time I'm going to go to add-ins. Now, if you were to install a purchased add-in to Excel, this is how you would activate it. By default, it doesn't become activated, at least most of the ones that are done properly. You have to actually turn them on, and you do that by going down to Manage down at the bottom here. Right now, it's set for Excel add-ins, but if you had installed something else, there are other options here as well, which I'm not going to talk about. They're a bit more abstract than the Excel add-ins are. But if you were to add something that would give you some advanced statistical analysis or data analysis in general, that tool, and it'll probably be named by the product that you purchased, would be named down here, and you would select that and then hit go. But I'm going to leave it as Excel add-ins, and I'm going to hit go. And these are the add-ins that come free with Excel. All I have to do is turn them on. And the ones I want to turn on are the Analysis Toolkit, the Analysis Toolkit VBA for Visual Basic to allow me to create Visual Basic to support those tools. And I'm also going to create Solver. Now that's one of the later lessons I'll be teaching you on what Solver is and how to use it. But I'm turning these on, and it's going to change the menuing around a little bit. And I think the first one that you'll see is if under Data, now we have a new one called Data Analysis and another one called Solver. And these are tools that I'll show you how to use in later lessons. But I wanted to activate them now. And once you've activated them, you can go back and deactivate them if you'd like. And they stay with the Excel that's loaded on this computer. I'll be using one of those to show you an example later in this video. So let's see, how do we create advanced formatting capability? That's called conditional formatting. Got to go back to home, and there's this one here called conditional formatting. Very powerful tool. It's a little bit tricky. You have to practice with it to get it to work right. But for example, let's say I wanted to highlight some of these employees based upon some metric, based upon what their, let's say, what their hourly rate is. Or I could just, let me highlight it initially simply with how many hours they work in a particular week. I'm going to highlight just this column for them. So the way this works is I highlight this column, then I go into conditional formatting, and I like to go to the advanced mode of it called manage the rules. There are shortcuts here, but I don't want to get into that. Let me go right to the advanced because all of that stuff is there. Right now, there are no rules related to that data set that I selected. Whenever you select something in Excel, it's referred to as a data set. You'll see that actually named in some forms later on in more advanced features, like Solver, for example. So for that data set, there are no rules. So I'm going to create a new rule. Click on New Rule. And I'm going to go ahead and pick one of the simpler ones. I don't want just a 2-color scale. I want a 3-color scale. And I could even change what these colors are by clicking on this area here. And I can change what, one extreme or the other extreme or the middle ground happens to be. And it's going to pick other colors along the way as necessary. So what I do here is, for this one to work, I pick an approximate median for this because it's asking me for that. So I would say the approximate median for this is probably $40. Looks very close to the median. So I'm going to change this. Right now it's defaulted to 50. I'm going to change it to 40. Let's see what it does when I say OK. I'm just going to take all the defaults on everything else. It's going to create a scale that goes from red to green, and it's going to have orange, and it's going to have sort of greenish yellow in the middle. It's going to apply to my range. This is the way the range is designated, standard Excel. And I'm just going to say apply. And right there, you can see what it did. So depending on the number in relation to the 40 median, it assigned a color to it. So it made the low number red and the high number green. I could have changed that in the options, but I just let it default to that. Okay, now I want to try something a little more advanced with this. A little bit tricky too, so you have to follow along carefully. I want to make these columns, actually 3 columns on all rows, highlighted to a different color depending on the value of hourly rate. I want to be a nice boss and say that any of my people who are making at least $30 an hour, they're good. I can depend upon them. They're both experienced. They are also people that will be less likely to leave. The ones that are less than that, well, they're not as protected as the others, to be quite honest with you. So what do? I highlighted it, go into conditional formatting. I'm going to go into manage rules again. You see the one rule we've already got on this other column that's changing its colors. So I'm going to create a new rule, but this one I'm going to say use a formula. And the formula I want to use is that we have a value that equals, in this case, the column E. And the way we define that is $E2, since 2 is the first one for the ones I am interested in highlighting. That's a designation that you have to do. So $E2. So as long as $E2 is greater than $30, I want those highlighted with some special formatting. And the formatting that I want done is I'm going to pick a nice color green here, a light one. I'm going to say OK. That looks like it's right. I'm going to say OK to that. This is the total rule now. It's going to use the formula as such, which is going to look at column E, starting with row 2. It's going to apply this format to these cells to match that row by row. And we quickly can test it by just saying apply. And then, of course, OK to close this. And sure enough, we see the 3 people who are over $30 an hour. They came out green. But now I want to say people that are below $25 an hour. Well, we got a problem potentially even bigger with them. So I want to do the same thing. I'm going to highlight the same area. I'm going to go back in the conditional formatting. I'm going to manage rules again. I have now 2 rules for this table. I'm going to create a new rule. It'll look very similar to the last one. We're going to use a formula. What do we want here though? We want this one equal to, so where the particular data equals that value, in this case $E2 again, is less than $25 an hour. And what do I want to do with them? I want to highlight them as potential issues. They could leave at any time, better offer, whatever. Hopefully I keep track of their experience and I pay them accordingly, but sometimes you get busy. I'm going to say okay to that. And this is the full rule now. I'm going to say okay. The full rule is right here. It's going to take that area, E2, column, all of E2. It's going to apply it to the A, B, and C, or A through C is what and it's going to make them red if that formula is true. Let's do apply. And there we go. We now see that 2 of them were highlighted as red. So we can use this as a real management tool. And it was, just takes a little bit of understanding of how that works. And it does a fantastic job. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, let me leave this alone for now. Well, let me get rid of all the rules just to make it so it's easier to follow along the next step. So I'm just going to delete all the rules. Delete rule, delete rule, delete rule. I'll apply it. Now, none of those formatting changes are applicable anymore. In the last example I want to give you is how to write a macro. And I'm going to make a very useful macro. Now, fortunately, I was able to turn on the developer thing. There are other ways to get to macros, but the developer is easiest for me. And it gives you a lot of choices. You can see the macros you currently have. I have no macros defined in this workbook. And again, you can define the scope of it, whether it's the entire workbook or just this worksheet. We'll leave it as workbook. There's no macros there. We're going to make one. Now, what do we want to do? Well, first of all, what was nice here before I showed you, we can sort these hourly rates around, right? So let's say I wanted to sort ID number. I think I already sorted that last time, right? They're in reverse order, so that works out well. Let me go ahead now, and I want to add a new employee that just started for me. Now, what most people do is they use the very next employee number. I'm assuming that this particular one, I don't have a hire date here. This particular one was the last one hired, so that's their employee number. Now, somebody may have been hired and then left, so the sequence might be messed up, but let's skip that little detail for now. So how would I add a new one? The easiest thing to do is to sort it like this, so that the highest one is there, and I'm going to do an insert. So I'm going to insert a new row. One thing nice about the table thing is it automatically puts it in scope. I don't have to bother, but if I put it on the bottom, I may have to move that little arrow. By putting it at the top, it makes it a little easier. And I can go ahead and I can type in all of the information, their first name, last name, ID number, hourly rate, their hours, individual earnings, etc. But what if I'm hiring 10 people at once? Let me reverse what I just did. So we no longer have that column added. This time, what I'm going to do, and another thing here is I need to temporarily use other columns. Never use the column right next to a table that's been formatted like this, right? Which is the format as table feature that we did earlier. But I'm just going to go ahead and skip that column and use these 2 columns as scratch columns. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. So I'm going to make a macro, and I'm going to record that macro. So if I go back to developer, one of the options here is record macro. One thing nice about record macro, well, let me give it a name first. What do I want to call it? I want to call it add employee. Don't use special characters on this. I'll just say add emp. And I could put a description in here if I want, adding a new employee, whatever, but I don't need to do that. But once I say, okay, the macro is going to start firing, which we are. It's going right now. But unless I do something, the macro doesn't do anything. So now from this point forward, until I hit stop macro, it's going to record every action that I do where I do something where I've clicked. If I'm just highlighting stuff, it doesn't record that. So what am I going to do here to make this work? You got to think this out ahead of time. I'm going to go ahead and right click again, and I'm going to do an insert. So this is a recorded step. Now, how do I get the next employee number here? Well, I could put a formula in here to do that automatically, but unfortunately, if I did that, when I sort it, the formula would sort it in some crazy value. So we have to put it somewhere else. That's why I reserve these columns. So I'm going to put the formula for ID number over here. So I'm going to say I want this box to equal this box plus 1. I could do plus 10, plus 100. I could do anything I want. I'm just picking plus 1. And then I'll hit enter. And I can see that it did work. And then this box, I want to also pre-assign their hourly rate. Now, one thing you may find out is, especially small groups like this, it's very difficult if you bring somebody in afterwards with basically the same experience and you wind up paying them more, even if that's the going rate. So if you have that problem, then your salaries actually might be too low and you might want to consider bumping up at least the low end of it. Well, the lowest right now happens to be this one. So I'm going to say that this field here, and of course, because I sorted it, that worked out. Now, if it didn't work out that way, we might have an issue, but it worked out exactly right. I may have to sort this again first before I could do that, but I don't have to do that. I can just say that this box here, again, is equal to this box. Now, I could make it the same salary. Still could raise an eyebrow, but I'm going to subtract. I tend to give raises by 25 cents. So I'm going to say minus 25 cents. So the starting salary of this new employee is going to be 1875, not 19. Now I stored them here because right now they're in as formulas. You see this? The formula is here. I want to turn them into non-formulas. So the way I do that is I highlight them, and I had them in the same order. First this one, then that one. I'm going to do a copy, and I'm going to come over to this box, and I'm going to do a paste, but I'm going to do a special paste. So when I right click, I am not going to pick just regular copy, which is this one. I'm going to pick this one, only copy the values. So even though it looks like it's the same, it's not. This one here has a formula. This one here has a value, and the same thing for this one, formula and value. So now we got it right. And then what I can also do is all you have to do with Excel, if you already have a formula like this, all I have to do is copy. It doesn't matter which one I pick. I could pick any one of them, but just to be consistent, I'll pick the very next one as well. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to paste. But I'm going to do a regular paste. As you can see, the formula was automatically adjusted. That's one of the magic things of Excel that hopefully you covered in a basic course or an intermediate course of some sort. So this is actually right. Now I've added the new employee, and I can go ahead now and stop the macro. Well, actually, no, let me clean up first. Let me delete this. I don't need it anymore. Let me delete this. Let me unbold everything that got bolded, and it did that because the row above it has some bold in it. So I'm going to come in here and go into home and turn off bold. So now it's done. So now I can go back into developer, and I can say stop the recording. I now have a macro. If I click on macros, it's there, add employee. Now I could step through it step by step if I wanted to, or I can just try running it. Or what I'll show in a later lesson is actually the code that was generated using Visual Basic that governs and makes that macro work. I'm not going to do that today though. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the macro. All I'm going to have to do now is run it. If I go ahead, and I could just run it from here, or I could do it from running up there, but let me just run it. Boom. I got a new employee. Now I can go ahead and, give names, to whatever. I'm just picking random stuff here. Obviously, there's no hours involved, but let's say there were hours. Now this guy's worked a couple of hours. Now he has a salary. This guy didn't. Now I wanted to add another employee. I don't have to do anything except for go to macros and say run. You have to highlight the macro if you have more than one. I can say run, and I can do that many times in a row. If I had to add 10 employees, I can do that. And then all I have to worry about with that is adding in the missing information for those. All of the other standard stuff is there, and the employee numbers have bumped. The salary has dropped. When I give a raise to everybody, hopefully I raise enough people to where it makes a difference, and definitely at the lower end and maybe the higher end. The middle end I tend to leave alone. That's a very common business practice. You really want to get out of the middle zone of your employees giving raises, but that's a whole different lesson. So anyway, that's what I wanted to show. Very powerful tool, macros. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I thought that was pretty interesting, and hopefully I covered all of the things in a way that was easy to follow. If you got something out of it, I would still appreciate if you'd consider subscribing to my channel. My little head will pop up here in a moment. Click on it, follow along. No charge involved. And all you have to do is have an account. And if you have a Gmail account, all you have to do is be logged into your Gmail account when you open up YouTube, and it will automatically log you in. So it's pretty simple to use. So until the next time, I hope everybody stays well and stays, doing what they need to do to keep busy these days. Take care.